So far, we have been seeing how the transform changes affect the layer. Now, I would like to show you how to make these changes happen over time. In other words, let's talk about keyframing. I'm going to go ahead and collapse this layer and expand it again. This is going to show me all of the transform properties. When we change the value of one of these properties but do not keyframe it, that is known as a global change. For example, I'm going to globally change the value for scale. I'll scrub the number down. I'm also going to go ahead and toggle the transparency grid off. That's a little bit better. Now I'm also going to change the position value of this layer so that it starts here on the left. I want for this particular layer to over time travel from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen. And for that, I'm going to use keyframes. To the left of all of the transform properties, there is this little stopwatch icon. When clicking on this icon, we are telling After Effects that we would like for changes in time to be possible. When we click on it, we open it, and several things happen. We get a keyframe navigator here on the left, and we get a diamond shape icon or keyframe here on this side of the timeline. So, notice that the keyframe was added at the point in time where the CTI or current time indicator is. Now I'm going to move the time position of the CTI, and I'm going to scrub the number for position. And again, we see several things happening. We see a path on the composition panel. This is how our clip will travel from left to right. And we also see another diamond shape or keyframe icon here on the timeline. This is indicating to us that we have two separate keyframes at two different points in time. Our clip now, if we scrub the timeline, will travel from left to right. It is important to note that clicking on the stopwatch does not necessarily add the keyframe. All that clicking on the stopwatch does is indicate to After Effects that we would like for changes in time to be possible. The reason why I mention that is because if you happen to click on the stopwatch again, you will delete all of the keyframes, because now you're indicating to After Effects that you don't want for changes in time to be possible, and these values now become global values, other words, not keyframes. I'm going to go ahead and keyframe this again. I'll move the CTI and I'll change the value. It is also important to note that there is a keyframe navigator on this side of the screen. If we click on this arrow right here, we go to the previous keyframe, and if we click on the other one, we go to the keyframe next. The middle icon, which is in the shape of a diamond, adds or deletes keyframes. There are shortcuts to navigate through these keyframes on the timeline. The letter J will move the CTI to the previous keyframe, and the letter K will move the CTI to the next keyframe. It is very important to either use the keyframe navigator or these keyboard shortcuts when you want to modify a keyframe. Because many a times people scrub the timeline and will place the CTI very near where a keyframe is but not quite on it, will change the value of the property that they're trying to modify, and what's going to happen is that a third keyframe gets added. And right now you might not be able to see it, but if we zoom in, and we can do that by pressing the plus key, you will see that there are now two keyframes adjacent to one another. This second keyframe is one that we do not want. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it. Notice that it turns yellow, meaning it's selected. And now I'll press the delete key. I'll zoom back out. You can also use the keyframe navigator so that you can time changes together with other changes. For example, I can move my layer from left to right, and at the same time I could rotate it. So, at the point in time where the first keyframe for position is, I'm going to add a keyframe for rotation. I'll use the keyframe navigator for position just to move the CTI, and at the point in time where the second keyframe for position is, I'm going to change the value for rotation. Now my clip is not only going to move left to right, but it's also going to slightly rotate. I'll do the same thing with scale. I'll keyframe it here at the beginning, and I'll make it a little bit smaller at the end. And now my layer is changing 3 properties over time: position, rotation, and scale. As we can see, what keyframing is doing is that it's making changes to all of these properties over time. What that means is this: if we play the timeline and we find that our timing is too short or too long, we can always select all of these keyframes and move them closer together or farther apart. What this does is change the timing of the change itself. These changes due to keyframes are known as interpolation. We can also copy and paste keyframes. For example, I could select this very first keyframe here for position. See, it's yellow. That is your indication that it is selected, and I can copy it. To copy a keyframe, use the shortcut for copy, which is Command-C on Mac or Control-C on Windows. Move the CTI to the point in time where you would like to paste, and paste. The shortcut for paste is Command-V for Mac, Control-V for Windows. And that's V as in Victor. I'll do the same with scale. Control or Command-C to copy, Control or Command-V to paste. And finally, rotation. Control or Command-C to copy, Control or Command-V to paste. If I play the timeline, we will see that it's going left, right, left. This interpolation is occurring because there are 2 keyframes that are adjacent that contain different values. If I would like for the clip to start left and remain left for a little bit, all I have to do is move these keyframes a little bit, and between the beginning of the timeline and the time position of the first keyframe, my clip will remain unchanged. In other words, any changes that I have applied will be global. There will be no interpolation until we have 2 or more keyframes. Let's imagine I want to start left, have it remain left for a little bit, move to the right, and then have it remain to the right for a little bit, and finally move back left. I can move these keyframes to give me a little bit more time, and I can now copy these keyframes so that I would have 2 adjacent keyframes with exactly the same value. Therefore, there would be no interpolation. This is the equivalent of a pause. Control or Command-C, Control or Command-V to paste. Copy, paste, copy, paste. What's going to happen now is that my clip is going to start left, remain left for a little bit, move to the right, remain to the right for a little bit, and finally go back left. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and delete all of these keyframes now. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and reset this, only because I want to show you a little bit on how you could use this in real-life examples. You could, for example, drag a new layer onto the composition. And I'm going to press the letter S for scale, and I'm going to reduce the scale of this layer. Basically, I could create a picture-in-picture effect. I'm going to go ahead and change my tool to the selection tool, and I'm going to move this other layer to the bottom left-hand side of the screen. I'll move my CTI to the beginning, and now I'm going to keyframe position of the top layer. I can move my CTI and I can change this value so that the bottom layer does a picture-in-picture motion moving from left to right. You can further differentiate this layer by adding a drop shadow.